Greetings from my tub. I'm in here getting 5% cash back when I pay in full with PayPal. No fees, no interest. Make the most of your money this holiday with PayPal. Save the offer in the app.
Ends 12/31. See paypal.com/promo terms. Points can be redeemed for cash and more. Pay in for subject to terms and approval. PayPal link and MLS 910457.
Hey, welcome into Walgreens.
Hi there.
Hey.
All right, hon. I'll grab the gift wrap, cards, and, those stuffed animals the girls want.
Great. And I'll grab the string lights and some... How about I grab some cough drops?
This is not just a quick trip to Walgreens.
I'm fine, honey.
Well, just in case. You know what they say. 'Tis the season.
This is help staying healthy through the holidays. Walgreens.
This is Addiction Medicine Journal Club. I'm Dr. Sonya Tredici.
And I'm Dr. John Keenan.
We believe that addiction is a disease that can be treated, and we want to help you stay up to date with the latest research that you can use in your addiction medicine practice. This podcast offers Category 1 CME credit through MyCares and Michigan State University. The links for the CME are in the show notes. This week, we're going to be discussing smoking and recovery from substance use disorder. John, how are you doing?
I'm incredibly tired. I'm currently like in school working. And have you ever had a house renovation?
Yes, but nothing major.
This is like first world problems, but they're redoing our kitchen and living room, like knocking down a wall, and we don't have a kitchen or anywhere to like live anymore. It is awful. And if you look behind me, my office at home looks like a food pantry.
Is that the new kitchen in your house? Is your office?
This is the new kitchen and an Instapot. And yeah, it is
my
awful.
gosh.
I'm like a week and a half in, and
Oh my gosh.
chaos.
So much takeout.
Now, my wife is a health nut, so like she won't let us do that. Like the idea of having pizza like once a week is like a no-no. So I have to like leverage for pizza once a month.
Well, your kids will thank her later.
Or closet pizza when no one's around.
Secret pizza. I don't know. If you have to do something in secret, if you can't be honest about it, maybe you have a problem.
Well, for most things, I don't know about the pizza part of it, but I think it's the one thing I might be okay with. All right. How about you? What's up with you?
Not much. Doing fine. So anything in addiction in the news you want to talk about this week?
Yeah, I got kind of an interesting article from Reuters. By the way, I feel like they keep having like the best like kind of hybrid articles, like part like scientific, part like lay press. I really do kind of appreciate their editorials. And this one's called "Exclusive U.S. FDA to Fast Track Nicotine Pouch Review Amid White House Pressure." And it's interesting, just kind of the state of where we are, that this is like an FDA priority, right? So this is where we are from a health institution. So the FDA is launching a pilot program to fast track review of nicotine pouches from PMI, Altria, BAT, and Turning Point brand. So a lot of these ones are ones that you're probably very well aware of, like Zyn, Altria's On, Reynolds Velo Mini, and Turning Point's Frey and Alp. And so these are kind of like these nicotine pouches that everyone is kind of using right now. And interestingly, if you saw the Senate confirmation hearing of RFK Jr., he was putting pouches in his mouth throughout, which they kind of very much so think were these Zyn pouches he was using throughout the hearings. And so basically, they kind of admit that the FDA has gotten excessive pressure from the White House and Trump administration to develop a fast track protocol for nicotine products specifically. And they expect that like this new pilot program is going to have expedited reviews completed by December of 2025. So kind of really accelerating what is typically a multi-year timeframe for an FDA review of a nicotine containing product. And just for like everyone to remember, it is interesting that the FDA, as part of kind of like the agreement with kind of tobacco and nicotine in the United States, they are allowed to kind of exclusively regulate the contents and what's in our nicotine products. So they do have a lot of oversight beyond just a typical like brand inclusion. And so I think that it's just very interesting that they talked about how that, this kind of new streamlined priority is kind of like a priority of the new administration when it doesn't really seem like a classic utilization of our FDA. Interestingly as well, one of them, Reynolds American, BAT, they donated over $10 million in funds to the Trump line PAC. So kind of there was some industry funding into the current political campaign of Donald Trump.
So are they trying to fast track them so that they'll be officially FDA approved as like medicines or just FDA approved as safe or?
I guess it's FDA approved to be safe. I guess they still go through an FDA approval process because it's technically like, it's like a medicinal product to a certain extent, right? It's nicotine.
Are they gonna be
Yeah.
fake smoking cessation products like, like Juul rebranded itself as a smoking cessation product for adults only?
No, they didn't really say any of that, although I'm sure it's all there. I mean, as a harm reduction doc, I kind of do feel like these do have a place, but um, I just think it's not probably the greatest use of our FDA resources, kind of getting these out to us as quickly as possible.
Right. Well, and that's the thing with any of these nicotine products. We see the same thing with vaping. Like, it's probably better than smoking. And as a smoking cessation tool, vaping is very effective because it sort of mimics the smoking experience. But as just a new product for people to get addicted to, it's not good. Tons of people now just vape as their addiction, not just vaping as like to quit smoking. And so it's the same with these pouches. Like, sure, I guess if you're using it to quit smoking, that's great. But if you're just going to get addicted now to like nicotine pouches and tobacco pouches, like, how have we done you any good?
I don't know, probably a
I
little bit
guess if
more
it,
so than smoking cigarettes. Yeah.
but the thing with the vaping is like now all these people just vape and they didn't smoke. People only vape. And I mean, I know some people who use the nicotine pouches have never smoked.
I'd be interested to see some population data because I know smoking rates are down. I wonder where if you add in like smoking rates 15 years ago compared to smoking and vaping, is it capturing the same population, or could you show like an association there, or is it totally different? Do you have more people? Like, is there a higher percentage of people engaging with this? So it's kind of capturing an audience that wouldn't even smoke. I think there'd be some interesting data there.
I mean, some of the vaping data, especially in youth, shows that vaping's capturing people who didn't smoke and haven't smoked. They sort of start right with vaping. Can't tell you data on the nicotine patches.
Yeah, but I mean, you captured youth before people smoking cigarettes behind the gymnasium and school, right? I feel like there's always a capture product. I would be interested to see if the capture product is higher than what we
Yeah.
previously did. I mean, it may be, right? I mean, I don't know, Captain Crunch flavor vape probably does market a little bit better to a 16-year-old or a 15-year-old than, a Marlboro cigarette. So,
All right. And as we know, you can like disguise it as a highlighter and sits in your book bag. No one notices.
or an exam
Oh,
room.
oh my gosh. So I was also wanted to talk to our listeners about um, the FDA, but the FDA and alcohol. So you've got like FDA and nicotine. I've got FDA and alcohol. I wanted to point everyone towards an article in Vox about the place of alcohol in the new FDA dietary guidelines because it's not just drugs, it's food, FDA, Food and Drugs, which is, of course, now controlled by the MAHA people. So RFK and the Make America Healthy Again people killed a major report from SAMHSA linking alcohol to poor health outcomes. So the federal government commissioned this report, but since it's under Biden and the Republicans think everything that's not from them is suspect, and because the report didn't sort of align with alcohol industry talking points, it was killed. So it was commissioned to inform the FDA's dietary guidelines. They're going to update them for 2025 to 2030. They do it every 5 years. And the Trump administration and the alcohol industry wanted to find that alcohol was good for your health so that alcohol could have a place in the dietary guidelines. But that's not what the report said. So they declined to release it. And they commissioned and then released an alternate report with researchers supported by the alcohol industry showing that alcohol is linked to improved health outcomes, which is a now discredited theory in most corners of the world. In case anyone is curious, alcohol is not associated with better health. At any level, it's associated with increased mortality, especially from cancer. That was a big part of this report that was going to be going into the FDA guidelines. So colorectal, breast, liver, oral, pharynx, larynx, and esophageal cancer are all alcohol related. But the thing that really pisses me off is that, the lobbyists from the alcohol industry claim that the authors of the studies were biased against alcohol, and that's why their report should not be included because the studies showed that alcohol causes harm. But information is not biased just because you don't like it. It's biased if your information deviates from the truth and leads you to an inaccurate conclusion because of external factors. The current White House feels that anything that disagrees with it is biased, but that is not true. Biased means you're going farther from the truth. If anyone wants to read the report that was not published, it does still exist. Actually, I found it buried on a federal website, and I put a link in the show notes. So probably download your copy now before it gets disappeared, like so many other web pages. And I'll put a link to that Vox article as well. So what do you think, John? Do you think the new FDA dietary guidelines should say anything about alcohol consumption?
Yeah, I mean, like, I don't know how much more data we need about alcohol that's not good for you. It's a dose-dependent poison at whatever level you use it in. I mean, I don't know. It's the idea that, like, yeah, there's bias with it just because there's a previous administration. I think that we've hit a real odd precedent here. Is it going to be like every 4 years that we just undo everything that was done in the previous 4 years, and we're going to flip-flop between these two extreme stances? It's kind of a scary time a little bit, right?
Well, it's kind of scary, but no other administration just fired all the people who know stuff and replaced them with, like, you know, social media influencers and assorted grifters. So I mean, I guess in the future it could flip flop, but
But in fairness, no other administration has figured out the cause of autism until now. Being
right, that
Tylenol.
it's Tylenol. That is true because you know what? We did make fun of RFK last time we recorded, telling him he only had like 2 weeks left to solve autism because he said he'd have it done by the end of September. And here we are. So we're sorry.
Tylenol.
We were so wrong. We were so wrong, RFK, about your abilities.
All right.
All right, sorry, listeners. A little bit of a rant there. John, do you want to tell us about your article?
Yeah. No, so my article, it's not super groundbreaking, but I think it's interesting. It's a concept that comes up quite a bit. And certainly I'd love to hear some listener feedback afterwards. So the article is called Cigarette Smoking During Recovery from Substance Use Disorder. It was from JAMA Psychiatry from August 2025. So background, smoking still remains the leading preventable cause of death in the United States, despite declining rates. Smoking rates remain high across all groups, especially those with non-tobacco substance use-related disorders. Individuals with substance use disorder have a higher risk of dying from tobacco-related causes. That was always kind of my favorite question to ask the residents when they rotate with me, or my favorite kind of board question was like, what's the number one cause of death of injection drug users? And it's actually, as a whole, tobacco-related complications, not injection drug use. Tobacco use is often untreated or ignored in health facilities treating substance use disorders. So I know that this has been controversial in the past. Kind of recent SAMHSA guidelines have kind of talked about incorporating tobacco cessation or tobacco use disorder treatment as part of kind of inpatient treatment standard of care in the most recent updates. Interestingly, about 48.5 million people in the U.S. had a substance use disorder in the past year, and 35.8% of them currently smoke. So almost 40% of people that meet criteria for substance use disorder smoke, which is about 4 times that of the overall U.S. average, which is 9.9%. I'll be honest with you, when I read that figure about like 35.8%, I actually feel that feels low to me, to be honest, from what I see kind of in my clinical practice. I feel like most of my patients in recovery are smokers to some extent, although I guess a lot of them vape now too.
Right.
Recovery from both substance use disorder and smoking are key public health priorities. And, previous studies have showed that, there doesn't seem to be a causative factor here, but there does seem to be some data that patients that also quit tobacco products do better in terms of substance use. Although these were like really kind of like not great studies, more like population level or kind of case series, not kind of a large database or randomized controlled trial showing this. But there is some previous data suggesting that kind of recovery globally from all substances simultaneously may improve outcomes. So what's the clinical question is, do changes in cigarette smoking predict substance use disorder recovery over time? And that's accounting for between-person confounders. So kind of does change of smoking status actually affect how likely you are to recover from your primary substance use? The study design here, so this is a longitudinal cohort study of 2,652 U.S. adults with a history of substance use disorder from the PATH, which is the Population Assessment of Tobacco and Health Study. examining the association between quitting smoking and substance use recovery. A little bit about this PATH study. It's an ongoing nationally representative longitudinal cohort study of U.S. adults. It's interesting. It's stratified and it actually kind of oversamples tobacco users, young adults, and Black individuals, kind of groups that were kind of historically thought to have higher rates of tobacco use. There's 4 waves of it. Wave 1 was recruited in 2013 to 2014, all the way up until annual recruitment ended at wave 4, which is 2016 to 2018. And they did do like some additional like replenishment cohorts throughout as people were lost to follow up. So the specific population that's kind of looked at here is this 2,652 U.S. adults that are aged 18 and above with a history of substance use disorder from this PATH study wave 1 cohort. So that's the first cohort from 2013 to 2014. And when they actually conducted the sensitivity analysis, they added in 3,340 additional participants from the second wave. A little bit of inclusion criteria. So they were adults in wave 1 of the cohort. They had a lifetime history of a substance use disorder, so kind of both current and in recovery substance use disorder. You had to have all available longitudinal data to be present to be included from this and the analysis. You had at least 2 waves of adult data during the study period. You also kind of had the reflection of a change in substance use disorder recovery status. So most of these people were a change from like not smoker to or smoker to non-smoker. No relevant missing data for inclusion. Exclusion was participants without change in substance use disorder recovery status or anyone that was missing any of these key variables. So the study protocol. So the design was a longitudinal cohort study with annual assessment over 4 waves. So wave 1 was that 2013, 2014, all the way to wave 4, 2016 to 2018. Data was collected via structured interviews from this PATH study, as previously discussed. They did smoking status measurements where they classified people as kind of never, former, or current smokers, so kind of 3 different classifications for analysis. And they did substance use disorder recovery measurements using the GAIN SS subscale, and they categorized kind of based upon the DSM-5 as either kind of current use or sustained remission. So covariates that they controlled for were mental health. So they used the PROMIS Global Mental Health Subscale, educational attainment, medical and urgent care usage, use of smoking cessation medications like varenicline or bupropion, and urbanicity based upon geocoded addresses. So they did kind of like some population and geographical cohorting. The primary outcome was substance use disorder recovery. So via this kind of global appraisal of individual needs short screener, so the GAINS SS subscale. They also defined as sustained remission as 4 to 7 lifetime symptoms with 0 past year symptoms, and current substance use disorder was any past year substance use disorder. So it kind of doesn't include that typically like early remission subgroup that we kind of classify people as. Cigarette smoking status was classified as never, former, or current, as we talked about. And they did statistical analysis. They used this fixed effect logic regression to kind of account for time varying variables and how they affect the substance use recovery and how they would modify the smoking relationship. So what do you think about that so far, Sonya?
I think it's good. I think the big problem with these studies is just, proving causation with these sort of longitudinal cohort studies, but it's a really good one. I wish there was some objective measures, instead of it being all self-reported, of course. But, you get what you get. You can only do so much. So I think it was good.
Yeah. Yeah, I'd say overall, it's a lot of good information. You're right. It's not causation. This is association. And, I think that that's how we kind of start with this. I think kind of a growing data pool of association is probably a great start to answering this question.
Well, I was trying to think like of my patients in recovery who've quit smoking. I don't feel like I have anyone who quit smoking while in the throes of like doing badly from some other substance use disorder. It always came later,
Yeah. I feel like anecdotally, a lot of times in smoking cessation, I do have people that quit, but normally it doesn't seem like it's kind of an early goal for people. It seems like it's kind of like, I always call it like the tree of health. I feel like you have these branches whacking you in the face at the bottom. That's like, do you drink calories? Are you actively doing drugs? And then as you go up, it's like, these are like more and more that difficult to obtain. And I feel like we get to them with time. And I feel like smoking ends up being towards the top, even though it's such a powerful modifier of someone's health.
Yep, takes a while.
Yeah, so it's the trial ballot. So the manuscript was funded through NIDA and NIH, so that no kind of industry funding. The one author had some long-term stock holdings from General Electric, Pfizer, 3M. I really don't think that would contribute to any bias here. I appreciate the disclosure. It's a large longitudinal cohort study, so like 2,652 participants. That's pretty good size, especially when you add in the additional over 3,000 they use for sensitivity analysis. The data was self-reported, so there was no direct measures of substance use disorder treatment or also kind of no really kind of mention or accounting for any kind of medications for substance use disorder. So I thought that would have been an interesting variable. And they tried to talk about this too, that they wish they had that data as well in this analysis. And I think they tried to like surrogate account for that by kind of adjudicating like past year office visits and urgent care visits as a marker of like care contact. So it's kind of like this 5 degrees of Kevin Bacon, but I think they want that answer too. They use fixed effects modeling, so that's attempts to statistically control variables over time. And like they did a lot of the paper was talking about all the statistical analysis, kind of looking for covariate analysis, trying to figure out what modified over time. And these are really great statistical modeling techniques, but it's hard because no matter what you do with a report in this, there is always going to be an X factor that you totally can't account for. So it's interesting to see that. And I know that they're trying. So it'd be great to have this question answered at some point with like an RCT, or, it'd be a really cool to see like an RCT where you had like 2 treatment centers that one had tobacco cessation as like a prime directive and one without, and saw how people did. So something kind of more randomized. But yeah, for what we had access to here, I mean, it's a population based study. So it's great. I love the fact growing theme in the literature is this kind of idea that abstinence as the sole measure of success is probably not accurate. So I feel like we've talked about this before. I feel like now I see this almost as every paper now seems to has a disclaimer about this is a limitation of the study. And I think that kind of as a group of people in this field, I think we're starting to kind of continue to realize and emphasize that abstinence alone isn't the only marker of success and recovery. So it would be great to have some functional outcomes too, but that's a whole nother level. So maybe that kind of dream RCT of treatment centers that we just talked about. So kind of what are the results? Out of the 2,652 adults, most were male, almost 60%, 58.1%. The mean age was 39.4, so younger than me since I'm 40. Race and ethnicity, most were white, 63.1%. A minority of them were Hispanic at 17%, and non-Black Hispanic was about 14%. I thought this was kind of interesting for smoking status. Out of anyone with a diagnosis of substance use disorder, only 8.5% were never smokers. That's crazy, right?
Yeah, that's amazing. So like 92% of them smoked at some point.
Yeah. 92% of patients that have a substance use disorder were a smoker at some point in time, which is incredibly high. And then it's kind of interesting. They had a relatively even split here, about 47.2% current smokers and 44.3% former smokers. And then in terms of substance use disorder recovery status, that also was actually pretty balanced. About 48.4% were in recovery for the past year or more, and 51.6% were not in recovery by the definition used here, if we're going off of abstinence only. So, the primary outcome, what they looked is like, what's the odds ratio kind of the association with in-person change. So like if a person went from a current to former smoker during their recovery, what was their chances of increased substance use disorder recovery? And kind of interestingly, adjusted and unadjusted both, there was a statistically significant association here where there was a slight improvement in terms of your odds ratio of recovery if you did have a transition from a smoker to non-smoker status. So the unadjusted odds ratio is 1.42 and the adjusted was 1.3. So kind of a mild effect size. I thought kind of it was interesting, not that this was the primary question, but this does kind of tend to kind of show validity of kind of how powerful the effect size is here. But when you look at like trends in recovery over time, it actually had a significant effect as well, but that was only an odds ratio of 1.11, so a smaller effect. And that's very interesting because you look at some substance use disorders, like for example, like alcohol use disorder, and actually, the most common recovery outcome is actually kind of non-abstinent recovery, right? Just over time. So kind of the disease kind of burns out. That's the most common recovery course, not the one that everyone takes But certainly, so time we know is a powerful factor in recovery for people. And then we know that someone's mental health is also really important. And mental health improvements association with recovery was only an odds ratio of 1.04. So it's kind of interesting in this particular trial, kind of changing from non-smoker or smoker to non-smoker was basically 50% more effective in terms of odds ratio than just time or improvement of mental health, which I think that means more to me than the other two outcomes.
Well, it's such a powerful connector. I guess again, what's the cause and what's just a correlation, you know? Like, quitting smoking is so hard that I feel like only my patients who are doing really well do it. And those who are struggling with their recovery and struggling with everything tend not to quit smoking. That's just my gut feeling. So I don't know if it's the cause or just a sign that you're doing really well if you can quit smoking.
Yeah, I also thought it was interesting. Educational level, medical visits, ED visits, and medication usage for smoking cessation were not significantly associated with substance use disorder recovery. So I was kind of surprised that all of that had kind of no bearing whatsoever. So it really seems like it's like the willpower recovery too when you take out the smoking medications, right?
Hmm.
So I guess kind of at the end of the day, like, does this help me with patient care? It doesn't. This isn't practice changing for me, right? I think that like when someone comes to me, I don't just do their buprenorphine or their treatment, right? I always tell them I have like a spiel in the beginning. And I'm also their primary care doctor. Like we do pap smears, order mammograms. I do birth control counseling, blood pressure control, treat hepatitis B or hepatitis C, treat their HIV. Like I really do look for a holistic approach when they're at the office visit. And smoking is more powerful than any of the things I just discussed, right? So like this is something that I talk a lot about. I do think that it's interesting that there seems to be like a pervasive feeling in the recovery community still that kind of de-emphasizes this in the early stages of recovery. And I guess not that it's practice change. I guess what would it take to kind of change the narrative on this for people in that community and in this industry to feel like that this is an equal part of someone's kind of recovery and how to get them to like improve their health and well-being?
Right. Well, fast tracking more nicotine products isn't it? Yeah, I mean, I sort of agree. I had read some personal experiences, writings of people in recovery about their thoughts about smoking and feeling, are you really in recovery if you're still addicted to nicotine, controlled by nicotine, ruining your health, spending your money. I mean, people meet the definition of substance use disorder for tobacco pretty much right off the bat if you're a smoker, you know? So, are you really in recovery? But then again, of course, who are we to say what it means to really be in recovery?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. I don't know. And not only do I like, it's funny, I take care of a lot of people. Like a lot of people recover and then what do they do as a job, right? A lot of them work in recovery field, right? I feel like I
Mhm.
have a lot of patients I take care of that are not, that are like, they're recovery advocates of some degree. And a lot of them do smoke. And, I talk to them about it and it's very interesting. It's still very de-emphasized. I think it's almost like I hate to use the word, but it's like the flash and the sex appeal of like overdose, right? That's like a very kind of dramatic event. Like it's very like PTSD inducing, right? And even though that's kind of not the most likely issue with someone's adverse health, it's still something we worry about. It's kind of this slow burn that people don't really feel, right? It's because you don't see it on the day to day. You don't see these dramatic cases that people tend to kind of die over decades, not very abruptly. So I just think it
Right.
has a different stigma behind it.
It's legal, You're not ruining your life in that sense to be a smoker.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I agree. I'm a huge nag about smoking for all my patients, and they've just come to expect it. And I've had a few who've said bluntly, "Please never talk to me about this again." And I said, "Well, I have to put a note in your chart because I'm not going to remember. When I smell tobacco, I'm going to have to bring it up, but I'll do my best to try not to mention
We're still going to talk about it again at this office
it."
at some point. Maybe it won't be next time, but we'll be back.
We'll circle back. Oh my gosh. Well, John, thank you for presenting this interesting article. I think it really does emphasize though the importance of, of just cleaning up your life in general, and there's more to doing well than just stopping the sort of primary drug that you were struggling with. So that's it. Thank you for listening to the Addiction Medicine Journal Club. The best part of any journal club is the conversation, and we want to hear what you have to say. So please send us comments on this article, especially if you have thoughts about smoking in recovery. You can send us comments on social media, email, join our Facebook group. The links are in the show notes. Original theme music composed and performed by Benjamin Kennedy. Audio editing by Michael Bonanno. CME support from My Cares, produced by Dr. Patrick Beeman and Ars Longa Media. Addiction Medicine Journal Club is intended for educational purposes only and should not be considered medical advice. The views expressed here are our own and do not necessarily reflect those of our employers or the authors of the articles we review. All patient information has been modified to protect their identities. Thank you for being part of the conversation. Have a great day.